The night sky above the Atacama Desert tore open with light. For a moment, it was as if a second sun had been born, streaking across the heavens with a roar that shook the sand. Villagers hundreds of miles away watched in awe as a burning object hurtled downward, carving a scar of fire across the horizon before vanishing in an explosion that rattled the earth. When the dust settled, a crater lay hidden in the desert's heart. No ordinary meteor had fallen here. By dawn, the site was already crawling with personnel. The Chilean government had requested international support after their sensors recorded energy spikes unlike anything seen before. Soon, teams from across the globe converged under the cover of secrecy. Among them was Dr. Layla Hassan, an aerospace propulsion engineer renowned for her work on next-generation fusion drives. She had been summoned without explanation, flown halfway across the world, and escorted under armed guard to a camp of tents and floodlights surrounding the crater. Her boots crunched against scorched earth as she approached the rim. She stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. The object was no rock. Half buried in the sand was the skeletal frame of a starship. Its hull was blackened and fractured, but even in ruin it radiated power. Twisted struts jutted skyward like broken bones. Strange markings, etched deep into the metal, shimmered faintly as though resisting decay. Sections of the hull appeared melted, not by entry through atmosphere, but by weapons fire. "This isn't natural," Layla whispered. "Correct," said a voice behind her. Colonel Jacob Mercer stepped up beside her, his uniform pressed, his gaze sharp. A veteran of countless deployments, he carried himself with the weight of command. Unlike the scientists buzzing around the site, Mercer was not awed. He was calculating. "Whatever it is," he continued, "it fought a battle before it fell, and we're going to find out who built it and why it's here." Together they descended into the crater, guided by work lights and secured cables. The air was thick with the acrid smell of scorched alloy. As they reached the shattered hull, Layla laid a gloved hand against the surface. It was warm, not from the crash, but from something inside. Inside the ship, corridors twisted like the ribs of some fallen giant. Panels hung loose, their surfaces covered with markings in a language that seemed more geometric art than writing. The deeper they went, the more signs of violence they found. Console screens shattered by force, bulkheads scarred with blast marks, and in one chamber, restraints that looked as if they once held something alive. "This ship wasn't abandoned," Layla murmured. "It was lost in a fight." Mercer's jaw tightened, which means there was an enemy. Hours stretched into days as the team mapped the wreck. Specialists recorded every detail while soldiers stood guard as if expecting its original owners to return. Beneath the wreck's bow, technicians uncovered what appeared to be a power core, cracked but still pulsing with faint light. When instruments were brought close, they overloaded instantly. The ship was not dead, it was sleeping. Late one night, Layla studied a shard of the hull under a portable scanner. She noticed that its atomic lattice shifted slightly whenever she applied energy, as though the material was learning from her tests. It was unlike any alloy on Earth, self-adaptive, self-healing. Her heart raced with the implications. Humanity had dreamed of technology like this for centuries, and now it lay before her, waiting to be understood. But Mercer was less hopeful. The day after, a patrol found strange depressions in the sand near the wreck, like footprints that led nowhere. Surveillance drones sent to investigate malfunctioned, their feeds cutting to static before going dark. When one drone was recovered, its memory banks had been wiped clean. Mercer pulled Layla aside. "This wreck isn't just a discovery, it's a threat. Whatever happened to the crew, something is still here, watching us, testing us." Layla frowned but didn't argue. She had felt it too, that subtle hum through the deck plates, as if the ship were aware of their presence. On the fifth night, the desert wind howled through the camp. A junior technician assigned to monitor the core chamber never reported back. When they searched, all they found was his discarded badge lying in the sand. No trace of him remained. Mercer tightened security, ordering armed guards posted at every entrance. Layla, however, stood in the chamber staring at the faintly glowing core, her reflection mirrored in its surface. She whispered to herself, barely daring to say it aloud. "This ship didn't die here, it's waiting." And though she didn't yet know it, the choice humanity made in this desert would echo across the stars. The Atacama facility grew quickly from a ring of floodlights and tents into a hidden city of steel and concrete. Governments called it a joint research project, but in truth, it was far more than that. The desert crater had been sealed by hangar doors large enough to conceal an aircraft carrier. Beneath, miles of reinforced tunnels branched outward, housing laboratories, barracks, and command centers, all orbiting around the alien wreck like moons around a planet. Dr. Layla Hassan barely slept. Days bled into nights as she and her team peeled back the secrets of the vessel one layer at a time. Every new discovery deepened the mystery. The ship's circuits were not made of wires or silicon, but strands of crystalline fibers that pulsed faintly, as if alive. When they connected scanners, the readings looped into fractal patterns, never repeating. It was technology that seemed to think for itself. Colonel Jacob Mercer kept watch from above. To him, the wreck was less a wonder and more a question. If this vessel had enemies, where were they now? And if they had the strength to bring down something so advanced, what chance did humanity stand if those same enemies returned? He kept these thoughts to himself, but quietly ordered his security teams to train as if war could begin tomorrow. On the 11th day, something changed. Layla was in the core chamber, the faint glow of the cracked power source reflecting across her face. She was studying fluctuations in its energy pattern when her instruments suddenly froze. The readout lines became vertical spikes, then flatlined into silence. A low hum filled the chamber, subtle at first, then rising in pitch until the air vibrated in her chest. The ship was no longer dormant. Floodlights flickered across the facility. Monitors died, their screens blooming with static. One by one, generators faltered as if drained of power. Mercer stormed into the chamber, his soldiers at his heels. "What did you do?" he demanded. "Nothing," Layla said, backing away from the core. "It's waking up on its own." The hum deepened. Panels along the walls lit with shifting symbols, alien script crawling like rivers of light. The cracked hull above them glowed faintly, repairing itself strand by strand, as if threads of invisible hands stitched the wounds together. The soldiers raised their rifles. Mercer's hand twitched toward his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. Something told him gunfire would be useless here. Then just as suddenly the glow faded. The hum died. The ship fell still again, leaving only the echo of its heartbeat. Around them, the lights of the facility blinked back to life. Screens rebooted. Instruments resumed their readings. For most, it was as if nothing had happened at all, but everyone in the chamber knew better. Layla exhaled shakily. It wasn't random, that was intentional. "Intentional?" Mercer asked. "It responded to us, to being studied, almost like..." She hesitated, then said the words carefully. "Like it wanted us to know it's still alive." The colonel dismissed the soldiers and pulled her aside. His expression was grave. "You listen to me. We treat this wreck as a hostile until proven otherwise. No assumptions, no wishful thinking. If it wakes up again, it might not stop." But Layla couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was not an enemy. It had defended itself once, long ago, and lost. Now it was here, broken but still clinging to life, waiting for someone to understand it. She felt an almost magnetic pull toward it, a whisper at the edge of her thoughts telling her it was more than just a weapon. Days passed with no further incident, but tension ran like an undercurrent through the facility. Guards patrolled the halls with weapons ready. Scientists argued over protocols. Every flicker of light, every unexpected sound drew nervous glances. Then came the first disappearance. A technician named Alvarez was tasked with monitoring environmental sensors near the forward hull. When his shift ended, he never reported to the mess hall. His radio was found on the floor of a side corridor, its casing split, the wires inside melted like wax. Search teams scoured the tunnels for hours but found no trace of him. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered Alvarez had been taken into the ship. Others claimed the vessel itself had reached out to him, luring him away. Mercer imposed strict silence, forbidding speculation, but the fear was already seeded. Layla sat awake in her quarters that night, staring at her notes. The data was clear. Each time they probed too deeply into the core, the ship reacted. It was not dead metal. It was aware. The next morning, as she entered the chamber again, she felt the hum before the instruments registered it. This time, though, it did not crescendo into disruption. Instead, a single panel on the far wall lit faintly. Symbols appeared, scrolling slowly. Not random this time, structured, purposeful. Layla's heart pounded. It's trying to communicate. Mercer's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The ship had awakened, and it had noticed humanity. The chamber was silent except for the low hum of the alien vessel. The panel before them pulsed softly, its symbols flowing like liquid light across the surface. No human language could compare. Each glyph seemed to fold into itself, fractal patterns nested within patterns. Dr. Layla Hassan leaned closer, her eyes scanning rapidly. She raised her wrist tablet and began recording. This isn't random. It's syntax. It's forming a sequence, almost like code, Mercer asked, standing at her shoulder. More like language wrapped inside code, Layla murmured. She traced the glowing lines with her eyes. It's too complex for coincidence. It's talking to us. Mercer frowned. Or it's luring us. The soldiers in the chamber shifted uneasily. Everyone remembered Alvarez, the technician who had vanished days earlier. Mercer had tightened security since then, ordering patrols doubled and communications encrypted. Yet for all his precautions, the ship had chosen now to make its voice heard. Hours turned into days as Layla and her linguistics team worked tirelessly, capturing each symbol as it appeared. Algorithms tried to analyze the patterns, but the results were maddening. Layers of meaning, some repeating, others shifting just as they seemed to stabilize. It was as though the ship were adjusting itself, adapting to their attempts to understand. On the fourth night, breakthrough arrived. Layla sat slumped at her desk, fatigue pressing heavy on her shoulders. Her tablet buzzed softly, drawing her gaze. She blinked at the screen, her exhaustion forgotten. The program had finally found a recurring sequence. Not a phrase, but a structure, a way the ship marked beginnings and endings like punctuation in human writing. She ran the sequence through every fragment they had gathered, stitching them together. The symbols rearranged into coherent clusters, glowing lines that now made sense in a rhythm she could almost hear. "It's a message," she whispered. The next day, she presented her findings to Mercer and the other senior officials in the command center. On the central screen, the alien script flowed, then slowly resolved into a rough translation. "We are not conquerors, we are pursued." A stunned silence filled the room. Mercer's eyes narrowed. Pursued by what? Layla shook her head. That part isn't clear. The language doesn't translate directly, but the intent is unmistakable. They weren't here to invade, they were running. The message continued, broken fragments emerging as her team deciphered more. "We fled across the void. They found us. This vessel struck crippled. If you read this, beware, they follow the trail of fire." Around the table, the officials exchanged uneasy glances. For decades, humanity had speculated about first contact, whether aliens would come as friends or enemies. Now, it seemed Earth had been dragged into someone else's war. Mercer stood with his hands behind his back, his voice steady. "If their pursuers destroyed this, then we are already in danger. We need to treat this message as a warning." But Layla's gaze lingered on the words. Something about them felt personal, almost desperate. Whoever had written them hadn't been sending a broadcast to the stars. They had been leaving a last will, a plea for anyone who found the wreck. That night, unable to rest, Layla returned alone to the chamber. The panel glowed faintly, symbols shifting like whispers at the edge of thought. She raised her hand, hesitated, then touched the surface. The response was immediate. The hum deepened and more panels lit across the chamber. Light raced along the walls, flowing like veins through the ship. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard a voice, not words, but an impression, as though emotion itself had been translated into sound. Loneliness, fear, hope. Layla stumbled back, clutching her chest. The ship wasn't just sending messages, it was remembering. She reported everything to Mercer the next morning. Though skeptical, he could not ignore her conviction. If it's alive, or whatever counts as alive, it might know more than we do. Can it tell us what's coming? "I think it already has," Layla said. She scrolled through her notes. "The pursuers, they left a trail behind. If this ship is correct, whatever destroyed them could follow the wreck here, to Earth." The colonel was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he turned to his adjutant. "Prepare global alert protocols, quietly. If the sky is about to fall, humanity won't be caught sleeping." But even as Mercer planned, Layla's thoughts turned elsewhere. The message was fragmented, incomplete. She was certain there was more hidden within the patterns, layers not yet unraveled. If she could fully decode them, perhaps they would learn who the pursuers were, and why this broken ship seemed to cling so desperately to life. That night, as she walked through the empty corridors of the facility, she heard the hum again. Soft, distant, but present, the ship was waiting for her. And she could not escape the feeling that time was running out. The Atacama facility was no longer just a secret. It had become the most guarded place on Earth. Satellites orbited overhead, scanning the skies for threats. Warships patrolled oceans under silent orders. Inside the desert crater, scientists and soldiers worked side by side, a fusion of curiosity and dread. The alien ship's message had changed everything. "We are pursued." Those words now guided every discussion, every late-night strategy meeting. Humanity had always wondered if it was alone in the stars. Now it knew the answer, and the answer came with a shadow. Dr. Layla Hassan had immersed herself in the task of decoding the rest of the fragments. Nights blurred into mornings as she and her linguistics team combed through endless streams of symbols. The ship continued to respond to her presence, sometimes dimly, sometimes in sudden flares of light that startled her colleagues. It was as if the vessel recognized her persistence and rewarded it with more pieces of its memory. On the 5th day after the warning was first translated, a breakthrough arrived. Layla sat at her console, eyes burning from hours of work, when a pattern finally resolved into clarity. She gasped and called Mercer immediately. Moments later, he strode into the lab, his uniform immaculate despite the sleepless circles under his eyes. "Show me," he ordered. Layla projected the translation onto the central screen. Lines of alien script pulsed, reshaping into clumsy but legible words. "They are harvesters. Worlds are not theirs. They come to feed. They break, they burn, they take." A murmur spread among the staff. Mercer's jaw hardened. Layla continued softly. "It wasn't a war of territory. It wasn't ideology. These things don't conquer in the way we understand. They consume. Whatever their need is, it makes them tear worlds apart." The colonel's voice was grim. "Predators." Layla nodded. "And efficient ones. The ship's memory describes them not as an empire, but as a swarm, endless numbers. Once they find a target, they never stop until it's gone." The weight of the words sank into the room. Humanity had faced wars, disasters, and plagues, but nothing like this. A civilization that destroyed not for conquest, but survival. A hunger written into its very nature. Mercer ordered the findings sealed under the highest classification. "The public cannot know yet," he said. "Panic will do the enemy's work for them. We prepare quietly." But keeping secrets from the world was becoming harder. Strange anomalies appeared at the edge of the solar system, disturbances in long-range telescopes, faint heat signatures against the void. Officially, they were dismissed as sensor errors. Unofficially, Mercer kept the reports locked in a folder marked with a single word: contact. Meanwhile, the ship continued to reveal fragments. Layla discovered a schematic embedded within the alien text, blueprints of a weapon unlike anything on Earth. It was not a single cannon or missile, but a system woven into the vessel itself, designed to amplify energy through crystalline matrices. It could burn through armor, shatter fleets, and perhaps hold back the swarm. But the blueprints were incomplete. Entire sections were corrupted, missing. One night, as Layla traced the half-finished designs, the ship pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips. Images filled her mind, flashes of battles in the void, burning wreckage, silhouettes of vast creatures silhouetted against dying stars. She staggered back, breath ragged. The ship wasn't just sharing data, it was showing her memories. When she reported this to Mercer, he studied her silently for a long moment. Then he said, "If this vessel trusts you, then you're our bridge. Keep listening. We'll follow where it leads." Days later, the ship delivered its most chilling fragment yet. Symbols formed into a phrase so simple it sent shivers down every spine in the chamber. "They will come again. The trail ends here." Layla stared at the words, heart pounding. "It means Earth. The wreckage fell here. That's the end of the trail. The swarm will follow it." Mercer gave no orders that day, but his mind was already racing. Humanity could no longer wait to be discovered. If the swarm was coming, Earth needed to be ready, not with hesitation, but with strength. That night under the desert stars, the colonel stood at the edge of the crater, gazing at the hidden vessel below. For centuries, Earth had looked up at the heavens with wonder. Now it would look with defiance. "We forged the weapon," he whispered to himself. And in the shadows of the ship, lights pulsed faintly, as if in agreement. The Atacama facility had transformed. What once was a quiet excavation site now roared with life 24 hours a day. Convoys arrived under cover of night, carrying equipment disguised as ordinary shipments. Engineers, physicists, and technicians from across the globe were flown in quietly, their passports erased, their presence hidden from public record. At the heart of it all, the alien vessel rested like a wounded beast. Its fractured hull still shimmered faintly under the desert sun, but now scaffolding wrapped around it like a cocoon. Sparks lit the air as welding torches carved into its surface. The sound of human industry mingled with the hum of alien machinery, creating a strange symphony. Colonel Mercer oversaw it all with the precision of a battlefield commander. He divided the facility into zones, one for reverse engineering, another for weapons research, another for power systems. Each team had no knowledge of the other's full work. Compartmentalization was security. But Mercer saw the full picture. Humanity was reforging the broken ship into its ultimate weapon. Dr. Layla Hassan moved through the chaos with quiet determination. The ship responded to her in ways it did not to anyone else. When she approached, panels lit. When she asked questions aloud, symbols stirred across its surfaces. Some called her the vessel's whisperer, though she disliked the name. She wasn't commanding it, she was listening. One evening, as she touched the central console, the ship revealed a fragment of its design. Energy conduits unfolded as glowing lines across the chamber walls, forming a lattice of breathtaking complexity. Layla recorded it all, her voice trembling. "This isn't just a weapon," she whispered to herself. "It's a living system, it grows with what it consumes." The implications were staggering. If humans could master this, they would possess a tool capable of reshaping warfare forever. But in the wrong hands, it could devour as easily as it could defend. Mercer, when informed, remained silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Then it stays in our hands, no one else." Yet keeping secrets was proving impossible. Rumors seeped through cracks in the walls of classification. Foreign governments demanded answers. Satellites had already spotted unusual heat blooms in the Atacama. Something extraordinary was happening, and the world wanted to know. One night in the command center, Mercer addressed his closest advisors. "We stand on the edge of exposure. If the public learns what we're building, panic will spread. But if rival nations discover it, they will try to seize it. We cannot fight each other when something far greater is coming." Dr. Layla added softly, "We have to unify, the swarm won't care about flags." The room fell silent, the colonel's gaze hardened. "Then we move faster, we finish the reforging before the world tears itself apart." And so the work accelerated. Human technology began to blend with alien design. Nuclear reactors were rerouted into crystalline cores. Superconductors carried energy into the alien lattice, humming with impossible efficiency. Weapons specialists studied the fragments of the blueprints and began testing scaled-down versions of the energy arrays. The first attempt vaporized an entire block of reinforced steel in less than a second. The engineers stared at the smoking crater in stunned silence. One whispered, "We've built thunder." But the more they unlocked, the stranger the vessel became. Some systems refused to respond unless Layla touched them. Others activated of their own accord, as if the ship was aware of the progress and lending its guidance. It was no longer a relic, it was waking. Still beneath the progress lay unease. Not every scientist trusted Mercer's tight grip, nor Layla's unique connection to the ship. Whispers spread through the ranks. Some feared the weapon they were creating was as dangerous as the swarm it was meant to fight. Others spoke of ownership, who truly had the right to wield such power. Tensions boiled over during a late-night test. An engineer from one of the energy teams accused Mercer of hiding parts of the translation. Heated words turned into a brief scuffle before security intervened. Later, Layla confronted Mercer privately. "You can't hold this alone. If you try to control it like a soldier controls a rifle, it will destroy us. This ship isn't a tool, it's something more. It wants to be used, but not misused." Mercer's voice was iron. "Our enemies won't hesitate to misuse it. That's why it stays under discipline. That's why I keep control." Layla met his gaze, unflinching. "Control or not, the swarm is still coming. We're running out of time." That night, the desert sky shimmered with a meteor shower. Soldiers stationed outside watched in awe, unaware that among the falling streaks of light, one lingered longer than it should have, burning brighter, descending slower as if guided. Inside the vessel's chamber, the panels pulsed once softly like a heartbeat. And in that glow, Layla felt it again, the faint impression of fear. The reforging had begun, but so too had the countdown. The desert winds carried dust across the Atacama crater, but inside the facility, the air was sharp with tension. Rumors had spread of something unusual in the skies. Soldiers at the perimeter had spoken of strange meteors, and satellite operators whispered of faint objects drifting just beyond the orbit of Neptune. Colonel Mercer did not believe in rumors. He believed in reports, data, and orders, and that morning he received one that chilled him to his core. The briefing room was silent as a grainy image filled the central screen. A faint shape glowed against the blackness of space, captured by a classified deep-sky telescope. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't an asteroid. Its edges were too precise, its movement too deliberate. Layla Hassan leaned forward, her voice barely audible. "That's not natural." The technician nodded nervously. "We've tracked 6 of them so far. They're entering the solar system from interstellar space. Slow, steady approach. No broadcast signals, no attempt to disguise themselves." "They don't need to disguise themselves," Mercer said grimly. "They think nothing can stop them." The silence in the room grew heavier with each word. Humanity had always wondered what first contact would look like. Now it had its answer, not an outstretched hand, but a clenched fist moving silently through the void. Layla broke the silence. "The ship warned us. They will come again, the trail ends here. This is them, the swarm has found Earth." The image shifted to another capture. One of the objects had briefly glowed with heat, its silhouette momentarily resembling a jagged shard of metal, bristling with spines. Not ships, not in the human sense, more like machines grown rather than built, vessels that looked like predators frozen mid-motion. One of the younger officers muttered, "They look like teeth." Mercer dismissed the meeting but kept Layla behind. He studied her carefully, as though searching for answers she didn't yet have. "You said the ship was afraid. What else do you feel from it?" Layla hesitated. She had resisted telling him everything, but the truth was impossible to ignore now. "It's more than fear, it's anticipation. Every time the swarm comes closer, the vessel reacts. It's as if it's waiting for the chance to finish what it started." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Then we give it that chance." From that moment, the pace of the reforging doubled. Exhausted engineers were given no choice but to continue. Test ranges were established deep in the Pacific, where experimental energy arrays were fired into the waves, boiling entire square miles of ocean in seconds. Submarines recorded the blasts, the roar of unleashed power reverberating through the sea like the echo of thunder gods. But for every success, there were failures. One reactor test nearly tore a rift in the lattice, forcing an emergency shutdown that left half the facility in darkness. Another experiment overloaded the containment fields, creating an explosion that shattered windows across the crater. Layla argued constantly with Mercer, warning him that the ship was not meant to be rushed, that forcing human systems into alien designs without respect for their balance was dangerous. Mercer, unmoved, countered with his own truth. The swarm was coming and hesitation was death. As Earth's leaders learned of the approaching threat, pressure mounted. Some demanded the project be shared globally, fearing one nation alone could not face what was coming. Others threatened to seize it by force. But Mercer, backed by his loyal commanders, tightened the circle of secrecy. One night after another grueling day of tests, Layla stood alone in the chamber. She placed her palm against the ship's surface. The faint hum grew louder, resonating deep within her chest. Images filled her mind again, alien skis, burning worlds, the swarm descending like a storm of locusts. But this time, another image lingered. The vessel itself, rising from the ashes of destruction, striking back with a fury so great that even the swarm recoiled. When the vision ended, she staggered, breathless. For the first time, she felt a spark of something beyond fear, hope. She whispered into the silent chamber, "You survived once. Together, maybe we can do it again." The ship pulsed once, as if in answer. Far above Earth, beyond the orbit of Pluto, the 6 jagged shapes drifted closer. Their motion was slow, patient, but inevitable. Behind them, faint signals hinted at more, many more waiting in the darkness. Humanity's time was running out. The reforging had to be finished, not in years, not in months, but in weeks. And as Mercer looked over the secret reports, as Layla felt the ship stir beneath her hands, and as telescopes strained to watch the oncoming storm, one truth settled over Earth like a shadow. The first sign of the swarm had arrived. The Atacama sky burned with the morning sun, but within the crater the light was eclipsed by something brighter. The ship, no longer broken, no longer a silent relic, rose slowly from its cradle of scaffolding. Engines that had slumbered for centuries ignited with a low, resonant hum that rattled every bolt and shook the ground beneath the feet of soldiers and scientists alike. Its crystalline hull gleamed with streaks of human steel, the scars of reforging etched into its surface like veins of silver and gold. It was no longer an alien artifact. It was no longer a ruin. It was something new, alien in origin, human in rebirth. Dr. Layla Hassan stood on the control deck, hands trembling as she traced the glowing panels that now responded to her touch instantly, without hesitation. The ship pulsed with light, in rhythm with her heartbeat, as though recognizing her not as a stranger, but as a partner. Colonel Mercer watched from behind the glass, arms crossed. For once, even his steel composure cracked into awe. "We did it," he murmured. Layla corrected him softly. "No, it's doing it with us." The first true test was scheduled for that day. The ship would lift from the desert, fly beyond the atmosphere, and release its reforged energy arrays in controlled bursts. The world did not know of this trial, but spies, satellites, and whispers already had pieces of the truth. Rival nations gathered their fleets in secret, torn between fear of Mercer's weapon and fear of the swarm. At the command console, Layla steadied her breathing, initiating ascent sequence. The ship's hull unfolded like a flower, panels shifting seamlessly as plasma vents opened. Dust and sand whipped into the air as the vessel lifted effortlessly, despite its massive frame. To the watching personnel, it looked less like a machine and more like a rising sun. "Altitude climbing. Stabilizers holding," Layla reported, her voice steady despite the exhilaration rushing through her veins. When the vessel pierced the clouds, the desert shook with thunder. Cameras tracked it from hidden installations, the live feed flickering across control rooms. Humanity was watching, though only a few knew it was happening. In orbit, the ship spread its lattice wings. Arrays of crystalline structures unfolded, glowing with light as human-made superconductors pumped energy into them. The patterns were intricate, geometric, almost alive. Mercer gave the order, "Fire the primary test array." Layla hesitated only briefly before pressing her hand to the command node. The vessel responded instantly. A beam of white fire erupted from the ship's heart, lancing into the void. For 10 full seconds, the heavens themselves seemed to split open. Satellites caught the image, a spear of light carving through space, brighter than anything man had ever created. In its wake, the fabric of the sky shimmered as particles realigned. When the beam ceased, silence reigned. Then the comms erupted in cheers. Engineers shouted data, readings that defied expectation. The weapon's output was greater than anything predicted. Entire fleets of conventional warships would pale before a single strike. Layla, however, felt the ship's pulse beneath her hand. It was not exhausted, it was invigorated. The test had not drained it, it had fed it. Mercer's eyes gleamed with grim satisfaction. Now the world will understand, humanity is not prey. But even as celebrations rang through the control rooms, unease stirred. Other nations had seen the test. Already encrypted transmissions surged across the globe. Some demanded access to the weapon. Others prepared for confrontation. The world's old rivalries had not vanished, they had simply been overshadowed. That evening, Mercer stood on the observation deck, watching the reforged ship glide above the desert under the stars. Layla joined him, her expression troubled. "They all know now," she said quietly. "The secret won't hold, they'll fight over it while the swarm is still coming." Mercer didn't look at her. "Let them argue, we'll be ready before they can act." Layla shook her head. "You don't understand, this isn't just a weapon, it's a choice. The ship doesn't want to serve one nation, it wants to serve humanity. If we don't stand together, it may not answer us when we need it most." He turned sharply toward her, eyes hard. "Then you'll make it answer, that's why you're here." But even Mercer, in his unwavering resolve, could not deny the truth in her words. The ship was powerful, yes, but also willful. It had chosen to awaken for humanity, not for flags, not for borders. Far beyond Earth in the cold dark past Neptune, the swarm stirred. The 6 jagged forms accelerated suddenly, their movement now deliberate, undeniable. They had seen the light that split the heavens. They had heard the challenge Earth had unknowingly issued. The storm was coming, the unveiling was complete, the final trial was near. The first sighting came from a patrol station orbiting Jupiter. 6 shapes, jagged and cruel, emerged from the black like shards of broken glass cutting across the stars. They moved with an eerie grace, faster than anything human-made could follow, but deliberate, predators closing on prey. On Earth, alarms echoed through command bunkers. Every satellite, every radar, every scope locked onto the intruders. Across the planet, people felt the tremor of history in motion. Humanity had long wondered what first contact would bring. Now there was no more wonder, only the storm. In the Atacama Desert, the reforged ship stirred. Its crystalline hull glowed as if it had been waiting for this very moment. Energy hummed through its veins, resonating with Layla Hassan's heartbeat as she stood at the command node. She had never felt more afraid. She had never felt more certain. Colonel Mercer strode into the chamber, his uniform crisp despite the chaos outside. His voice was iron. "This is it. They'll test us and we'll answer. Launch the ship." The ground shook as the vessel lifted, breaking free of the desert cradle with a thunder that rolled across mountains. The sky split as it soared upward, cutting through clouds and fire, leaving the earth below in silence and awe. Layla sat at the control interface, eyes closed, hands spread against the glowing panels. The ship's pulse merged with her own, each beat a shared promise. She spoke softly, though every microphone caught her words. "We rise together." In orbit, the 6 swarm vessels spread into formation. They were not ships in any human sense, more like blades wrapped in engines, spines bristling with energy. They radiated menace, and when their first strike came, it was without warning, lances of dark plasma that ripped across space and shattered 3 satellites instantly. The reforged ship met their fire with a shield of light. The lattice wings flared, absorbing the storm. The impact shook Layla's bones, but the ship held firm. It was not fragile. It was not broken. It was reborn. Mercer's command thundered across the comms. "Return fire." Layla did not press buttons. She did not pull triggers. Instead, she willed the ship forward, and it obeyed. A beam of searing brilliance erupted from its core, striking one of the swarm ships dead on. The jagged vessel convulsed, its body cracking as molten fragments spun into the void. Cheers erupted across Earth. Humanity had drawn blood. But the swarm did not retreat. They surged, circling the reforged vessel, their weapons tearing at the shield. Sparks flared, alarms screamed, and Layla gasped as the ship cried out within her mind. For a moment, she feared it would break again. Then something deeper stirred. Images flooded her mind, not of alien skis, but of Earth itself. Oceans, mountains, cities teeming with life. The laughter of children, humanity's will to endure. The ship was showing her what it fought for now, not just its survival, but theirs. Layla's fear hardened into resolve. "We're not prey," she whispered. "We are the storm." The ship answered. It unfolded further, panels shifting into new formations never seen before. Energy surged, and with a roar of light, the vessel released a wave that rippled across space like a tidal surge. 2 swarm ships were caught in its path, their jagged forms twisting before shattering into fragments. The remaining 3 faltered, their formation broke. For the first time, the predators hesitated. Mercer's voice cut through the comms. "Finish it." Layla guided the ship with precision, weaving through the swarm's desperate fire. The vessel moved like it had always been meant for her hands, a predator finally free of its cage. One by one, the jagged ships fell, torn apart by beams of light, until the last burst into silent shards. When the final enemy vessel dissolved into glowing debris, the void went quiet. The storm had passed. Humanity still stood. On Earth, billions cheered. Nations that had once schemed and whispered now stared at the sky in awe. The reforged weapon was no longer a secret, it was a symbol. Not of fear, not of division, but of survival earned together. In the command chamber, Mercer allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "We've shown them," he said quietly. "Humanity will not fall." Layla, still linked to the ship, felt something more. Beyond the wreckage of the battle in the darkness between stars, she sensed the swarm again, not defeated, merely delayed. There were more, far more, waiting beyond the void. But she also felt the ship's pulse, steady, strong, united with her, united with humanity. She opened her eyes, speaking words that carried across the comms to every ear listening. "This is only the beginning. They will come again, but so will we." The reforged vessel turned slowly above the Earth, wings spread wide, its light casting across the planet below. For the first time in history, humanity had an answer to the darkness beyond the stars. And it was ready.